The Toronto Blue Jays made some lineup changes ahead of tonight's game, and it's pretty interesting. So we'll break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as some injury updates. A lot to cover on that front. So stay tuned for what's coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Don't be alarmed, I'm not at the Rogers Center, but it does look like I am. This virtual background, credit to Zoom for that. Looking pretty cool, Nick. I could get used to this. I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to tonight's game. The Toronto Blue Jays are kicking off a series with the Minnesota Twins, team that ended their season last year. Going to be a bloodbath because the Twins have been playing some really good baseball. The Jays, not so much. So it's going to be a tough series. Going to be an offensive heavy series, at least for the Twins' sake. Can the Blue Jays match that? And that's going to be the big question mark. But they made some lineup changes ahead of tonight's game to hopefully add a bit of thump and hopefully change the fortunes that have been plaguing them in the early portion of the season.
Yeah, they made some big changes. Finally, what seems like it's been 2 years now of not making lineup moves, they finally made some. And some big injury updates, actually. So you're going to stay tuned for all that. Before we do, quick reminder, if you're part of the 70 or so percent who aren't subscribed, make sure to hit that button. We make Jay's videos every day. And yeah, shout out to Peter from the Rogers Center right now. But let's just get right into the first topic, which is the make moves. And Peter, we've been clamoring for this for so long, and they actually did it today. Now, granted, there is an off day for George Springer. He's dealing with some sort of the viral illness that's going around, but this roster lineup change is pretty significant. So now we're looking at Davis Schneider leading off with Dalton Varsho in the 2-hole, and then Vladdy and Turner. Now Jansen's moved up to the 5. You have Bichette down to the 6, and then you have Biggio, Connor Falefa, and Clement. And again, you can see it here. He bats lead off with Springer off, and I'm curious to see how he does tonight. If he does well in that leadoff spot, Peter, I could see George Springer, when he returns tomorrow, in theory, moving down away from that leadoff spot, because these changes have been clamoring. Fans have been clamoring for him forever, and they finally got their wish to a degree. I'm sure we'll have to see when Springer comes back, but it's interesting. Our best hitter, number one.
Yeah, well, Springer should have been moved down a while ago, the way that he's been struggling. And I know the track record, but he hasn't been the same George Springer for the better part of a year now. This is not a problem that has plagued him for 38 games. This has been a problem that's plagued him for over a year now. And he's not the same George Springer. The bat speed is declining, the power has declined as well. So it makes sense that they would go ahead and make this move here. And Davis Schneider, like you said, has been the best hitter on the Blue Jays this season. He's been the most consistent one, at least. Maybe you could put Justin Turner in that mix as well, but he's tailed off as of late. But Davis Schneider, he's hitting for power. He's getting on base. It makes sense. And he's a pretty decent base runner as well. I think he's an underrated base runner. So him in that leadoff spot, I don't think he'll be out of place on the base pass. And Dalton Varsho, too, has been one of the better, hotter hitters in the lineup. So giving him more at bats, as many at bats as possible, is a good thing. And Vladdy's starting to turn the corner as well, which is a very welcome sight to see if you're the Blue Jays. So I like this. Danny Jansen, too, has been fantastic. That top 5 is pretty formidable, the way that they've all been performing. Then if Bo can continue hitting balls to right field and having good at bats like he did last game, then that bodes well for the future. But I think right now this is the best lineup that the Blue Jays can put out, and I'm excited to see what these guys can do tonight against a pretty tough pitcher in Joe Ryan of the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, and obviously with the righty up there, that's why you have Varsho playing, you have Biggio playing. Clement finally gets a start, but if you said that the lineup starts to look a lot deeper if Bo Bichette and George Springer can start to play better, because then you're looking at the top 7 or so playing very well, and it's finally nice to see Danny Jansen moved up and Davis Schneider specifically moved up, because I mean Danny Jansen's been one of the Blue Jays' best hitters since he came into the league. Obviously, his injuries have been the biggest issue there, but let us know what your thoughts are on the lineup. Peter, I think there were good changes. Overall, solid changes. We'll have to see how they actually perform tonight. But it's time to move on now to some injury updates, and they're interesting because obviously the Jays have been missing a few guys. They've been missing Jimmy Garcia, and that is not the right chapter. We're going to roll with it anyway. There's some injury updates. He is unstoppable, referring to Davis Schneider, but injury updates, Peter, to get into today. So we have George Springer. His viral illness is out of the Jays lineup today, and we'll see about the leadoff spot moving forward. And that's a bit of an interesting thing, too. Kind of goes back to the changes there. But Jays aren't necessarily pulling the plug on Springer at leadoff more day by day, which kind of lends credence to what I said earlier. If Springer ends up, or Davis Schneider ends up doing good in that one spot tonight, I could see easily George Springer slotting in down to maybe the 6th, maybe the 7th spot. I mean, he hasn't hit like a leadoff hitter, but he's out. And then you also have Jimmy Garcia, who is finally back and available out of the Jays bullpen. And there is some more, which we'll get into in a second. But what are your thoughts on that comment right there by manager John Schneider, as well as finally Jimmy Garcia back? If we can start to get healthy, hopefully the team can go on a run.
Yeah, Jimmy Garcia has been the best reliever on the Jays this year, and you could tell that he was sorely missed in some of those games where the back end of the bullpen just couldn't finish the job. So it's great to see him back. Don't know what the restrictions are going to be on Garcia going forward here, at least for the immediate future, but it's great to see him back because he was pitching the best he has in his entire career. His fastball was touching 99 miles an hour. His slider was biting like we've never seen it bite before. So he's an integral part of this team, and great to see him back. And George Springer, like I said earlier, Nick, I mean, yeah, I think he's got to get moved down. Just get you did it with Bo Bichette. Bo Bichette is widely regarded as the best hitter on this team, and he has been for the better part of 2+ years now. So why can't you do it with George Springer? Is there like a clause in his contract that doesn't allow you to move him out of that leadoff spot? When he in his first season with the Jays, he hit fifth at times with them. He was not always in that leadoff spot. You don't have to tie a guy to a certain position just because of his pedigree. And I like to see them mixing it up today. They kind of have to mix it up because Springer is out of the lineup, but that forces them to make changes and that forces them to give Davis Schneider a shot. That forces them to move Danny Jansen up in the lineup, who has been so good ever since coming back from injury. So I think if the lineup is rolling tonight and you see some great things, then once he does get back, you're not going to shuffle everything back around just to get George Springer in the leadoff spot again. If you win tonight and you see great offensive output 1 through 9, I wouldn't be shocked to see George Springer hitting after Bo in the 7 spot. Seriously, like I know it might be outrageous to say, but he hasn't looked good this year. And you got to try to find a winning recipe. That's been the big issue here. You're not winning games, but you're not trying different stuff. You're not trying to mix it up, and you're not trying to see what else
Definition of
works.
insanity right there.
Yes, definition of insanity, hitting your head against the wall and expecting a different outcome. So I like what they're doing today. You change it up, you see what you got in this lineup 1 through 9, and if it works again, you go back with the same exact lineup the next day. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I like to see the change today. Hopefully, it can pay dividends for the Jays.
Yeah, and John Snyder said, or sorry, George Springer came out and said that he's fine if he's aware of other people being potentially willing and better in this case to be in the leadoff spot. And John Schneider also said that he's going to be willing to try some new things going forward. And he basically said that they need to put out the lineup that's winning right now. It doesn't really matter about track record at this point, Peter, because we've been talking about track record now for the past couple of years, and if people can't produce, it won't matter. Before we wrap up, quick injury updates. Obviously, Garcia, this was from a few days ago, but Garcia's back. Bowden Francis through a bullpen session that went well, so he is on his way back, and Chad Green has now been playing long toss, so the team is hopeful he'll throw off a mound later this week, and Joey Votto is starting to resume baseball activity, so health is starting to get better. Joey Votto is still a Toronto Blue Jay, and Aaron Sanchez is now a Toronto Blue Jay as well, which I covered in a video a couple days ago. But things are getting a little bit crazy. That'll wrap it up. Let us know what your thoughts are on all this in the comment section. And Peter, hopefully the Jays can get some winning going and inch closer back to 500. But if you want to check out a video from yesterday, click on your screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow.